Welcome to the Strategy Remix. This is a LinkedIn Live audio event. If it's your first LinkedIn Live, do feel free to raise your hand so I can promote you to the stage if you have any questions or comments. We will capture those as we go, and you're more than welcome to join us for the chat. So there is no text chat itself, right? So if you want to react, then use the react buttons, of course, and some of you are doing that already. But if you have a comment or a question, please raise your hand and we'll promote you to the stage. So thank you so much for joining. I'd like to welcome my very special guest and colleague, Stephanie Horwitz. Stephanie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh boy, I will. Hi everyone, how are you? My name's Stephanie, or Steph Horwitz. And what can I say? I know Sammar from a work setting at SAP. Working at SAP.io, working with startups who are partnering with SAP. And I also have a podcast, which is a topic we're going to talk about today, called What Should I Do With My Life? And as the name suggests, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life, and many of us are as well.
That's perfect, Stephanie. And I think, we've interacted as colleagues, and also, I've interacted with you with your podcast persona. So, let's start with that, right? So I called the title of this particular session, the journey from zero to podcast hero. And you did your own event, right? I think a few weeks back, which I joined, where you invited everyone to find out more about that journey and about how to create a podcast. And that inspired me, to invite you as a guest on the Strategy Remix. And I recall you said on that event, to get started, you obviously need to reach out to get guests, and don't be afraid, right, to reach out. And I thought, okay, let me try taking your advice and reaching out to Steph. So I've done that. So great to have you with us. So what I'd like to do is understand, firstly, your journey into this whole domain, right? So I think if you take it perhaps from your earliest thought, perhaps around just public speaking and how you sort of handle that in a general sort of work sense, and then what sort of inspired you then to start experimenting with sort of perhaps podcasting and creating videos and so on.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the public speaking was always something I enjoyed. It came naturally to me. I was always very theatrical and dramatic child, for better and for worse. I was always putting on plays and entertaining people. My parents would have guests for dinner, and somehow I'm up there singing and dancing and just who knows what's happening. But that was always a pretty comfortable place for me to be. Not to say I always get nervous before, I get anxiety before, my stomach hurts before every public speaking engagement, no matter what it looks like. But I get an adrenaline high out of it. I really enjoy it. I love connecting with people in that way. But with the podcast, I didn't even know this was going to become a podcast. It was during COVID. It was August 2020, lockdown still, in and out of lockdown. And I just felt this creative outlet. And I thought about doing a podcast, but I did not know what I would talk about. I didn't know what topic I would talk about. I'm in Tel Aviv right now, which has a lot of tech startup-y podcasts. And I was like, what do I have that will stand out from other ones? So I didn't know what to talk about. I needed a passionate topic in order to really drive it. And I thought, as a joke, wouldn't it be funny if I talk about how none of us know what we're doing with our lives, like how I don't know what I'm doing? Right. And that idea was, born. I thought about, I know a lot of interesting people who have interesting career journeys and stories, and I should just talk to them and hear about their journeys and how they figured it out. And my first interview was with my dad, and I didn't even know it was going to be a podcast episode. I thought it might stay in the family. Maybe I'll make a YouTube video. I wasn't sure. And then I kind of got into it. But the podcasting is super different than any other kind of public speaking, I would say. It's like a totally different dynamic and way of communicating with someone. Should I?
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think you've described that situation very well, right? I think it's finding that point of inspiration initially, right? And I think maybe did you discover that by accident and even choosing the name, right? What should I do with my life? Was that a sort of like casual catch-all, or was it something that you sort of felt would be a real focus actually to help people maybe find a route?
I thought it came about pretty early and I thought it was really funny. I just thought it was silly and relatable and most people who hear it laugh. But I also felt with the title, there was like this vulnerability to it, and posting on LinkedIn where everyone is professional and has their fancy titles and their fancy posts, like putting myself also as a professional out there on a platform like LinkedIn, being like, I don't know what I'm doing, what should I do with my life? And I was also worried from a work perspective, what will my manager think of that? What will my colleagues think? Are they going to think, who is this girl? What is she doing? She's an imposter. She doesn't know what she's doing. Why did we hire her? So I had those fears, but I think that's kind of one of the best parts of all of it and of the topic of normalizing this figure it outiness that we're all kind of on this journey. And a lot of us are figuring it out as we go and we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed that sort of feeling, right? And just a quick shout out to the audience. Thank you for joining. And also I can see, I think Katya and a few others are very good on the emojis. If you have any thoughts or comments, then do raise your hand and we'll promote you to the stage. But on the particular topic, Stephanie, in terms of like this imposter syndrome, right? I think it's interesting. Actually, there's no finished article, right? When you think about your podcasting journey, or in my case, a kind of content creation journey, you don't really know necessarily where it's going to go, right? And you're going on this voyage of discovery and self-actualization, actually, because you are trying to discover your topic, you're trying to discover your audience, you're trying to discover your tone of voice, you're trying to manage the technical side of it, getting the right equipment, and then not being afraid to try it. So in all of that, where did you specifically start? And was it like, okay, now I've got this microphone, I'll give it a go? Or was it that I've got this idea, now let me just try it? And you tried it with your father, as you said. But the next stage beyond that, how did you go about formulating the next step of actually formalizing this?
Yeah. So I started to think of a few interesting people that I knew who I could talk to. So before reaching out to people I didn't know, keeping it more comfortable, people I knew I could have these honest conversations with. And then I remember in the session we were in together on podcasting, we talked about the microphone, about the first step. And I was doing something for work. Someone was video recording me for work. I told them I was starting a podcast. And they said, you need a microphone. Like, this isn't even an option. You just need to do it. You need a microphone. And I went out and I bought a microphone. And it was a major moment for me because it was also a financial investment in this project that I wasn't looking, and I'm still not looking to profit off of it. So I'm making an investment in this financially. And it gave me confidence, the microphone. It was powerful. The sound is so clear. I felt more legit. So in every sense, it kind of helped me on the journey and, gain the confidence. And I would say the podcast is always evolving. I launched a few episodes. I launched 5 episodes, and then I realized, I could really do recaps at the end of the episode of the lessons learned. And then I started doing blogs. And then I felt, there's really a very similar type of person I'm interviewing. It's generally white Jewish people from similar backgrounds. I want to be more inclusive. There's a lot of interesting stories and interesting people out there. I want to share these stories. So that became a goal of, reaching out to people of all different kinds of backgrounds. So it kind of just evolves and it's always growing and moving. And it still is. And I think that's the beauty in doing something like a podcast or taking on, you with StrategyRemix. I'm sure it looks a bit different now than you envisioned it, or there's different iterations of it, or you're trying to change and improve it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think I feel that symmetry, and as you described it, right, as we were talking just earlier in the pre-live, for me, it was that, trying to find that avenue to be able to share ideas outside of work, because I was
Yeah.
doing a lot of stuff before, just like you, about work, right? We happen to work for the same employer, and there are certain, prescriptive topics we're expected to do, A,
Right.
in our day jobs, but B, also to represent the brand and so on. And so I was following that, very rigorously. But actually, some people suggested, and I think a couple of them actually listening right now, said, you should branch out a bit. You're a professional, you have something to say, you have thoughts and opinions, you have experience, which is of interest to people.
Yeah.
Right. And the more you can share that, right, you'll find an audience. I thought, okay. So let me kind of build this Strategy Remix brand. And the idea came to me because actually I was just playing with logos, and I've been learning Adobe. You've seen the sort of artwork I've been creating. And I get
It's
slightly
a good
better
place to start.
every time.
The logos, I believe in the logos. I believe in playing on Canva and visualizing it to make it happen. That's how the podcast started for me. Visualizing. Right. Seriously, that's like what gives you, so it makes so much sense that that's how it also was for you.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I'm glad you mentioned that. Almost like it felt almost like childlike, like you're sketching in a book, like perhaps when I was in high school, like sketching my name as a logo and imagining that as on a billboard or something. And the same way now, so playing with Canva or whichever Adobe in this case, I just play with that. And actually, the Strategy Remix, just as a title, just to share with you. So I was trying to go for a retro feel, and then I thought remix, like to listen to remixes, and then I thought Stranger Things, and then I tried to recreate the Stranger Things logo with different words, and then actually I realized that Strategy Remix is actually exact same number of letters as Stranger Things, but it fits. So you see, so if you visualize something, you actually manifest it, right? Would you agree?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I really do.
So and that kind of happened, right? So by visualizing that, and then that became a sort of brand by which that I've tried to build this visual identity, and then tried to create this sort of podcasting, or at least this platform for now. So a quick reminder to our guests again. Thank you for the emojis. I see those coming in. That's so cool. Thank you, Sunil, Nina, Mubashira, Aftab, Katya. Really interactive today. Really appreciate that. So if you have any comments, questions, feel free, press the raise hand button and I can promote you to the stage, and happy to share your points of view. So while we're waiting for those, so Stephanie, so if we go back in time now, so you said you're starting in August 2020 or so, you had your first podcast and then your second. So at what point did you start to get the sort of feedback and realization, actually, this is something where I'm starting to generate a sort of community, I'm starting to get an audience? When did that sort of realization happen that moved from a sort of experiment into a sort of, more sort of a formal type approach, and you had this branding?
Yeah. And I think just to backtrack a little on that, because, touching on branding and personal branding, I was very not into the idea of my face being part of this podcast. When I made the first Canva logo for the podcast, and all the first logos of the first season, the cover art is not my face. It's a bunch of Post-it notes. It says, "What should I do with my life?" And I felt like I saw so many people putting their faces, and I was like, oh, self-promoting this. And I'm a confident person. I'm an outgoing person, but it felt not comfortable for me. But with the evolution of the podcast, I realized it's important. People want to see the person behind it. That's what's going to make people more likely click. That's what's going to make people engage more, when they can see the face behind it. We all want it. And, even when I'm looking at new shows, I'm looking at the face, and if there's no picture, it's just words, I'll still probably listen if the topic is interesting, but it's been really interesting. And interesting. I just said that twice. Sorry. It's been a long day. But I was getting feedback early on. People were enthusiastic about it. The people I interviewed, I really enjoyed it. Like, I am not one to speak on getting a grand following or getting thousands and thousands of followers and hits, but it was more the personal messages of someone taking the time to write me, being like, "This episode was so helpful. Thank you for sharing this. I learned so much from this person. Can I reach out to this person? I want to connect with them. And just kind of slowly building that camaraderie and community and normalizing this sensitive topic that we're not always so comfortable bringing it up. And then I was invited for speaking engagements to talk on the subjects of career journeys and podcasts and communication, also in work. I was invited in my work setting to talk about this external project. I also ended up doing a podcast for work for energy startups. Anything about utilities startups, let alone producing and creating a podcast all about utility startups. But I had the confidence and understanding from doing it myself. So it was also cool to see how the outside project was weaving. We're refreshing. Can you all still hear me?
Yes. I can hear you loud and clear.
Can you still hear me?
Yes. Thumbs up. Everyone can hear you.
Sorry. My computer. Oh, I see the thumbs up now. Sorry. My computer was just refreshing. So what I was saying, sorry if I'm repeating myself, is it was very cool to see it being positively received in my work setting, which was a fear I had anyway of being accepted by, my colleagues or my employer. It's just a journey. What can I tell you? It's just constantly changing. And then I decided to invest more time and money into creating a website and doing a branding photo shoot and working with brand designers on creating a personal brand. That was like a whole step. It was like a revamp, and putting myself out there, and my face is out there now. That was a big change, and I was really uncomfortable with that at first. And then you just kind of get used to it, to be honest with you. And I think it's been really helpful. People want to see the face behind the project. That's something I've learned. People want to connect.
Yes. Cameron, I'll promote you in one moment. Let me just follow up with Stephanie, and then I'm glad to have you on the stage. So I think it's very, very interesting, the point you made there, right? So you perhaps doing it as a hobby, but also get recognized at work. And then it becomes also a self-fulfilling thing. I think the same thing also, I suppose, will happen in my experience as well. So you're doing it perhaps as a hobbyist, but people do see that, right? It goes into your own personal brand and how you're perceived and received at work. And so you create new opportunities by trying this, right? And there's no harm in having a go. And you make two very interesting points as well, I think, about, seeing your own image. And, I felt the same way as well about seeing my own image. It's not about self-promotion, but people do relate to you, and you kind of need to have that sort of presence. But also the voice. Hearing yourself, not like I love to hear myself, but hearing yourself is a very strange experience at first. Just say from my side, I recorded some voiceovers. People asked me to do some stuff like that, and narrate some videos. And then I thought I sounded horrible, and I gave it to people. Like, oh, that's great. Really like it.
I love your voice. I can listen to you talk all day. Keep going.
Oh, that's very, very kind of you, Stephanie. But I have to say, it's very grating at first, right? To see yourself and hear yourself. But as you say, you kind of get used to it, right? You overcome that initial latency, if you like, and then learn to self-critique.
Yes.
The other aspect is learning those visual or verbal tics that you have, scratching your chin if you're on camera, or saying a lot like I am.
Absolutely.
This is a sort of problem, but you overcome that, right? So what was your experience of kind of canceling out those sorts of tics?
Oh my God, I still do it. Well, I think what's interesting with the podcasting is because it is an edited conversation that you ultimately put out in the world. Meaning if you have the tics, if you say, like, whatever it is you say, you can ultimately cut that out. But of course, with practice and with time and just having that awareness, you get better at it. So I used to always respond immediately to someone by being, yeah. So like after everything they said, I said this annoying, yeah. And I also felt pressure to immediately respond to something someone said. And you can't always immediately respond. Again, podcasting is a different format than a live conversation. If you're on a panel in front of a live audience, if you're giving a talk, I mean, particularly with the podcasting, I'm referring to if you're in a conversation with someone, right? Like right now we're in a live conversation. I can't edit. Whoever's listening is hearing it how it is. With the podcast, you're giving a certain version of it. And I think it is a matter of time that you work on it. But we're all just so hard on ourselves. I think part of it is that we're really hard on ourselves. It's going to be cringeworthy at first to hear it, but you just have to move through it, and it gets better. But I think that knowing you can edit changes some things. You can take those pauses, which is what I was referring to before, but I went on a little tangent. Sorry. You can take the pauses, you don't need to rush to give a smart answer. You could take a minute, take a breath, collect your thoughts before you're responding in an intelligent way to what someone said. So these are things you kind of learn. I think that it's easy to ramble and go on and lose focus. And with the podcast, there's like a time limit. So you want to be precise. You want to be coherent. You want to have your North Star of the topics that you need to cover. It's a totally different way of communicating with someone, and it takes time to get used to it. And I don't want to say that it's not authentic because it's edited. That's not true at all. It's just different, and you just clean it up a little bit, make it more digestible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. It's a different medium, right? So if, for say video, for example, is my preferred medium, but then you're editing footage, what I realized through that process, and I got better over time, was creating emotion and visual impact. So I started to feel and learn this language of video editing, which actually is building a flow and a set of emotions, and you realize, okay, this is how advertisers do it. This is how movie directors do it. I'm not saying I'm any of those things. It's just that you start to recognize the beats. In the same way, whether you're podcasting, or in this case, broadcasting live, unfiltered, with all the various issues that come with that, there is still a sort of cadence you're trying to achieve. There's a structure you're trying to achieve. There's a sort of feeling you're trying to generate in the audience. But each medium has its own place, right? So going live is a different medium, different feel, versus a podcast, you say, can be a bit more refined, perhaps. You're not trying to create a false narrative, but you're just trying to create that smooth listening experience, that you can download and enjoy, on a pair of headphones while you're having a jog or something, which is different than sort of live radio like this.
And I remember feeling like, how much should I edit out? Not necessarily in terms of content, but also in terms of pauses. I remember being like, oh, there's all these pauses. I need to get them all out. But there is something to be said in a pause. There's purpose in the pause based on what that person is saying. So I remember at first it almost sounded unnatural because I was cutting out so many of the pauses that it was kind of like, hi, how are you? Good. How are you? La, 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 very fast back and forth. But, not just in that kind of cadence, but just in the conversation. What's the person saying? That pause should be there based on this big thing they're about to tell you, or this hard personal situation they're bringing up, or something like that. I think you just, you learn as you go, and No,
that's it, right? You learn as you go, and you improve as you go, and you develop your own style using those mediums. And it's appropriate perhaps to the guest or the topic and so on, and you kind of develop your own sort of instinct around how to do this.
Yeah.
So let me invite the audience again. I think, Cameron, you put your hand up earlier. Please do. Again, everyone, you're more than welcome now if you want to put your hands up, and I can promote you to the stage. Thank you, Cameron. Just give me a second. I'll press the allow to speak button. All right, Cameron, you're on. Please unmute.
Hi.
Hello.
All right.
Hi, Cameron.
First of all, thank you very much for this event. Podcasting is something I've had a dream of starting myself, so this topic's very much interesting to me. So for my question, going back to branding, could you tell us about your experience with mentorship and the places where you found your inspiration for how you developed your podcast and building your brand?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Well, I was inspired by my most favorite podcast, which is called Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard and Monica Padman. If anyone listened to Armchair Expert, then do a little clap emoji. I was so inspired by them and their realness, the different kinds of guests they take on, their openness, their vulnerability. So I'm always laughing in their episodes. I'm always learning. I really admire their interview style. So in terms of the inspiration, it was that. I didn't have a podcast mentor that I knew. I really didn't have a person who, actually, it's not true. I'm sorry. I take it back. I had a friend. Thank you for bringing this up, Cameron, because this is important. My friend, Natalie Stern, from my childhood. A few years ago, she came out with a podcast, and she was the first person I knew who had a podcast. And this was before what feels like today, that everyone and their mom and their cousin and their dog and their neighbor has a podcast. Natalie was the first of people I knew, and I was so in awe of her. How did she do this? Oh my God, how does she have that equipment? Look at her photo shoots that she did. This is amazing. You know, it seemed unattainable and it seemed super aspirational and inspirational. So I did speak to this friend. How did you get started? Like, I asked her questions about it. I told her I was starting. She gave great advice. And we had very different approaches, but nonetheless, it was good to have someone I felt comfortable with to talk to. So I was wrong when I said there was no one. That's very not true. With the branding, I worked with this awesome company called Human Deluxe, and they did many workshops with me and sessions to understand my personal brand. And these exercises, and one of the previous co-founders of Human Deluxe is on here. It's Katya. So shout out for making that connection. Katya was also a guest on my podcast. So if anyone wants to listen, shameless plug, Katya's episode. And she's done so many more amazing things since our episode a couple of years ago. But what I would say, Cameron, is I'd never done these exercises of self-branding and things like that. So it was really helpful to ask these questions and understand what makes me me, what colors reflect that, what's the vibe, looking at different kind of, not Pinterest boards, but different kind of, why can't I think of the word, like a bulletin board with lots of different images and kind of trying to put together what makes you you and who is your audience, trying to identify your audience and what do people resonate with, and also what are your flaws and what are your weaknesses and how do we position that and show that, hey, that's actually your strength. And so doing those exercises really helped me develop this brand and have more clarity on it. And at the end, they gave me this brand Bible where I can always refer to, not just colors and fonts, but values. And I think doing those kind of exercises are super, super helpful and will guide you in not the persona, because you'll ultimately be you, but kind of what are those values and those pillars, I guess, of you and your show and what you're trying to do. So I would definitely recommend doing something like that to hone in on what makes you special and why is your show going to be so special.
Okay, Cameron, does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for joining and sharing your questions. Rest of the audience, you want to raise your hand if you have a comment, a question. Mina, yes, more than welcome. Mubashra as well. Please do join us. Let me allow you to speak, Mina. Oh, did I bounce you back? Sorry, Mina, I lost you there. Do you want to put your hand up again?
Every time you say put your hand up, I just want to sing Single Ladies. Now put your hands up. I'll scare everyone and not do that every time you say it, but I'm thinking it every single time you're doing it.
Okay. I should thank LinkedIn for that. I'm blushing. All right. Okay, Mina, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Stephanie, lovely to meet you remotely. So my question is, I've done podcasts in the past, well, I thought I had, and I thought I'm semi-famous, but I'm obviously not. But my question to you is actually linked to that. Do you have to be known, whether be it in your industry or in your environment, to be heard on a podcast?
Oh man, that's a really good question. And I guess my follow-up question is, how do you define being heard? Is being heard a large audience of a lot of people? Is it a small audience of engaged people? Because I really feel like anyone can do it. And to find your audience, if you want the audience, okay, if you don't care about the audience, anyone could just have this platform and talk about whatever they want. Like if they want to talk about laundry and every day updating what their dog ate, they can. I don't know who's going to listen to that, but if you want to be heard by the people, you have to understand what the people want to hear. Whereas and maybe it's a special interest group. Maybe it's just 15 people who care about your laundry. But if you're okay with that, then that's great. I feel like in the podcasting game, connections are really important, of course, but start easy. Start with people and then look in your network. Who looks impressive? Who are you connected to on LinkedIn to that person? Would they make an intro? This has happened to me before, and it's been great. And there's been people that I thought would never, ever say yes to me, and they did. And having a connection helps. I also think it helps if you just put yourself out there. You have to just don't think of yourself. And I deal with this all the time. Oh, I don't have so many listeners. Like, why would someone want to be on my show? Guess what? Get out of your own way. You have an amazing show. You have value to offer. You tell the person why. Why should they be on your show and why it's a great opportunity. Also, a good tip of the, I was trying to say like trick of the trade. When you have a guest that is super interesting to you that you got to and not the easiest way. Maybe it seems very impressive, this guest. Say, hey, I hope you had a great experience with me. Do you have a friend or another contact who you think could be a great guest for the show? Keep utilizing this networking you're doing with your guests to bring you to more interesting people that are outside of your existing circle. I think it's like how you measure success. Do you want a bajillion listeners or it's hard. Anyone can do it. But if you want a lot of the listeners if you want a lot of listeners and a lot of engaged listeners, it's a lot of work. And you might have to put money into sponsoring and paid reach and investing in teammates to do social media for you or XYZ. You just have to start. I really feel like anyone can do it. And if you love it and you want to make that happen, I do feel like the tools are in place. It just might take a lot of time and some money.
No, I love that. I appreciate it. I think it's all about quality as opposed to quantity in something like this. And it's not about the numbers for me, but it's about, as you said, having the right people listening. And I'm good with that.
Yeah. Well, good. Then do it. Go for it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mina, for that. And if I may add, I think, it is about just getting up and just doing it. I was reading a stat recently that, of the people who want to write a book, which is around 20% of the population, the actual number of people who actually get around to writing the book is 0.02%. So what that means is that in the written medium or the books that are available, that what you see on the bestsellers list isn't necessarily the best idea that anyone's ever had. It's just that they got around to actually writing it.
Right. So right? True.
And so, I felt the same way, even trying this with the Strategy Remix, which is, okay, who's going to listen? Who's going to join? Who's going to be my guest? I don't know till I try. And I don't know if people will like it or dislike it. And if they don't, so what?
Yeah.
You need to just try it, right? And,
absolutely.
It's like we say in England, it's the Marmite sort of thing. Some people like it, some people don't.
I love that. It's also self-selecting, the people who are on this call right now, you're all amazing, but you don't have to be here. Like you rock, but you decided to join this. Something about it is interesting to you in some shape or form, So it's also a self-selecting group that is going to listen. And I couldn't agree more that you just need to start, because you're going to adjust and respond to the people listening and the feedback you're getting. You're going to change. Maybe people say your episodes are so long, Stephanie. They're 5 hours long. You need to cut it down. You're going to get feedback and you're going to adjust based on what the people who are interested and invested in you want to see.
Yeah, and I feel exactly the same way. It's like, when I first started creating content, just like you, just the initial lockdown, I think it's March 2020 when the lockdowns happened here in Dubai, and I was locked away, and I was like, I need to create content. I first tried creating very long form content, like 15, 20-minute videos, and it was exhausting to create that. And I didn't know who was actually watching it, and now everyone's just watching 30-second TikTok videos. And I know we have colleagues who are creating TikTok videos, but I'm like, I don't think that's appropriate for the audience, the demographic that I'm reaching.
Right.
I can try it, but it looked like, just trying a bit too hard. However, there's something to be said, for the long form, right? If you want to explore a topic in depth, if you want to have the right thing. And then as I created more content and more videos, I started to appreciate that. Why do you have a director's cut of something, right? Because if someone is paying a movie studio and as investors they're trying to sell movie tickets, right? To make a profit. They don't really care what the story is. They have people to decide that, but that's just what they think will sell. And then sometimes you get this conflict that I've always observed, right? Between the producer and the director. The director has a vision. He wants to deliver his artistic vision. The producer is on the board, if you like, to make sure that they deliver a profit out of this project. And the two things are not necessarily compatible. But in this format, if you're writing a book or you're doing a podcast or whatever, you're able to explore whatever it is because it's your domain, right? No one can tell you to stop it 5 minutes earlier or make it 10 minutes shorter or whatever. You want to say your piece and you'll find an audience who are interested in that.
Totally.
So I think I totally agree with you. You should do what you feel is right, and you will find people who will resonate with that, right? They want to hear from you.
And maybe you'll try different formats too. Like I started this past year doing live Zoom calls, like choosing a topic, taking taking an interesting, compelling speaker guest and having a live chat with them, with other folks involved, similar to what we're doing now. So no, that's not a podcast, but it's a different format for having a similar type of meaningful conversation. Just seeing, how does this work? Do I like this? And you know what? I liked it because I like how people are interacting with us right now. In an interview, and I wanted to bring this up, and it does tie in nicely. In an interview, I am reacting to the person I'm interviewing, which is great, but I don't interact with the audience. I love conversations. I love interviews and hearing someone's story and responding to them, but it is not something that you get the instant gratification and the live feedback. And I think that's important for people to think about when they're thinking about starting a podcast. Like when you're public speaking in front of an audience, you'll see people laughing and smiling and, interacting with you and what you're saying. And with the podcast, you have that with your guests. But once the podcast is edited and on its way and is published, you have no interaction and no grasp of how the listener is responding to what you said. And that's not in your control. And for me personally, that is challenging because I am a people pleaser. Yes, I'm working on it. I like the instant gratification. I like making a joke, hopefully, and seeing people laugh and seeing people smile. And we don't have that.
Yes, completely. I totally agree with that. Right. I as a public speaker, thrive on that. Right. And just recently I was sharing my wife. I did a presentation for work. And no disrespect to any colleagues on the call, but I put a lot of effort into that particular presentation. I tried to be funny and I made jokes and I did all sorts of things on that, little skits to make the particular topic interesting. However, I rehearsed it. And then when I actually delivered that presentation on that day to around 25 people globally, not a single person turned on their camera. And so again, no criticism of anybody here, but if you as a performer, for want of a better word, when you have zero response or feedback, that can be a bit hard, right? When you're not expecting that in that medium.
So true. So true. I feel that.
So we've got 5 or so minutes left. I'd like to ask the audience, you want to stick your hand up, raise your hands and join the conversation. See a lot of old friends here. Mirza, Karina, Sunil.
No pressure.
Maybe. Yeah. Thanks, Sunil. Let me just allow you to speak.
Hey, Sammar. Hello,
Hello.
Stephanie.
Hi.
Sammar, I want to say, and I've said this to you hundreds of times, you are the most incredible speaker that I've seen in our network. I think one of the best SAP has. And I just hope and wish you keep doing more and more of this and keep inspiring us.
That's very kind of you, Sunil. It's always great to have you in my corner.
So nice.
It wasn't a paid.
Yeah, okay.
You won't believe. I was in a workshop and I was still listening to your podcast. I just finished the workshop 11 minutes back. Yeah. So.
Thank you. That's very kind. That means a lot to me, Sunil. You've always been a cheerleader of mine. I really appreciate that. And your kind words always inspire me to try this kind of thing. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Yeah. Mohammed, you wanted to share an observation?
So, observation and question as well. First
Please.
of all, thanks, Sammar and Stephanie for doing this lovely session. Really enjoying it. What I want to ask, actually, especially from podcast point of view, what are the, let's say, good tricks? To improve sound, because this is more important. And more difficult to improve rather than you improve your physical look. I feel that's easy to improve, but when it comes to sound improvement, do you want to share some kind of recommendations, because that's, I think, critical when it comes to this kind of setup.
Okay, yeah, I can share a couple of observations and then I'll let Stephanie share hers. So definitely you need to invest in the hardware, as Stephanie was saying earlier. So right now I'm using a dedicated podcast mic. I don't know if you can tell, but maybe you shouldn't be able to tell that the sound is even. And this particular device, for example, that I'm using cost a fair bit of money. I didn't tell my wife that I bought it because it costs that much. But this particular one, for example, will filter out all background noise and echo and eliminates all of that without the need for, putting these attachments. If you see podcasters, right, and they'll have all sorts of equipment and things, the mufflers they put in front of the microphone to eliminate the plosives, they're called, which is the per sound. So you're talking into a microphone that's not protected, you get that strong and that background feedback sound. So you need to invest, A, in the right equipment, and then B, for podcasting, you need to have the right sort of editing software and techniques to be able to eliminate background noise and harmonize the sound. And then also there's post-production you can do, for example, to improve the overall richness of the sound. So actually what you hear on a sort of an officially high budget podcast you might download from Apple, for example. We'll have our favorites and some I download regularly. They sound extremely rich and beautiful, but bearing in mind they've been recorded in a dedicated studio on the right equipment, and then they've had a lot of post-production done on it. But even with a modest budget, you can definitely improve your sound by taking those steps I'd recommend. So invest in the right equipment and message me afterwards. I can make recommendations for you on that. And then look at the post-production. Stephanie, do you have any recommendations?
I really don't have further recommendations because I am bad and do not invest as much in the sound. I invested in the microphone and I do the editing, and I have not mastered the sound world yet. Obviously, if you have a budget and you have other people who can kind of mix and do things for you, that's one thing. And if you're a one-person show, it's on you. So this is territory that, being totally honest, I'm intimidated by, and I feel overwhelmed by it. That doesn't mean it's not easy and we can do it. But I have a very, very basic understanding of the sound improvement. But you're absolutely right. It is super important and it makes a big difference, the sound quality.
Yeah, so a couple of observations on that is that I think content is king, right? If you don't have great equipment, but you have something useful to say, that's what really counts. Having great equipment and nothing to say won't get you anywhere, right? So content is king. The value of what you're saying is extremely important. And then the equipment and how to do that technically. I mean, I love that kind of stuff. Obviously I'm in IT, I'm a geek, I've done all the wiring myself and had to learn it the hard way, but I'm interested in that. If you're not, there's various shortcuts, but don't forget, having the right voice and content is what will get people to listen, just like they listen to Stephanie, and the post-production will come, right? And in the end, you can always find people to do that for you. But no one can create the content like you can. And this is so, so important. You know how to do the topic you want to talk about. You have the feeling about that. You have the emotion connection to that. This is what's important. No one else can bottle that for you. Post-production, sound effects, cleaning up audio. If you don't know how to do it, you can find someone to do it for a reasonable price.
I love that you said that.
We're reaching the end of our time. I think Anita wanted to say something. Anita?
Hi, thanks so much for setting up this event. And I really identify with a lot of parts of Stephanie's story, especially her talk about how it took her a while to put her own face on her podcast cover art, because my previous iterations of my show, I didn't use my face either. And then I can definitely relate to over editing in the beginning, because I think in the early days, I was just taking out all the filler words and it was sounding a little bit unnatural. And so I've kind of gotten a little better at making it so that even with the edits, it still has like a natural cadence, a good flow to it. But I wanted to ask a question about making your first hire, because editing is something that I have been trying to outsource for some time, but I haven't been able to find a good fit yet. And so I was wondering if you had any insight into making that first hire in terms of getting someone to join your team, either for the purposes of editing, post-production, social media management, and how did you go about finding someone that was suitable to your needs and that you worked well with?
That's a really good question. I am currently a one-woman show, so I have not hired, but I have looked into some of these services. Social media, love-hate relationship with it, as most of us may. I have heard a lot of good things about looking at folks on Fiverr, and with that, really just being able to test. You could one episode with someone on Fiverr, give it a chance, see how it goes, see how the quality is, if you like it. And then you can normally do a package with someone. And that's, of course, per episode. That's not really hiring someone onto your team. That's kind of outsourcing. So it really depends what you want to do there. But I feel like if you have the budget and you can focus on your most favorite part of your work and the podcast, then you should definitely explore it. I'm sorry I don't have more advice beyond it, but I think that if you're a master at the subject at hand and the content and getting the guests, and you don't like social media as much, or you need help with the reach and engagement on social media, can definitely look into it. And I have heard from other creators that those places can be very helpful, very quick. And you could always, try someone different if it's for a one-off.
Yeah, if I'm mad, I 100% agree with that. I think Fiverr is a great source. If anyone's listening, want to check it out, it's Fiverr with 2 R's, so fiverr.com. There's lots of resources available there. You can find people to help you out. But I think, as I said before, as Stephanie's saying, content is king, right? You know how to drive that. You can always find technical experts to drive the production or the post-production or whatever you need. But content is king. And just like you can't necessarily replace, you can replace the brush, but not the artist, right? And in this case, you're the artist, you're driving that content. You can always substitute the brush. So that is the most important thing to guard. And other things are perhaps more of a commodity that you can pick up.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights.
Most welcome. And thank you for your comments and questions.
Thank you. I can't wait to check out your podcast.
Yeah, it would be an honor, honestly.
Oh my God, I'd love to. I will. I'm on it.
Perfect. All right, so we're slightly over time. If anyone else has any final questions or comments, more than happy to take those. We're reaching the end of our time. Anybody else? Okay, Mohammed, you get the honor of the last person to join the stage. Okay, Mohammed, would you like to unmute yourself?
Oh, sorry. First of all, thank you, Sammar, for setting this up. And thank you, Stephanie, for your great insights. They're really valuable, and it's been a joy listening to both of you. So my question is, so now, like we have a lot of topics and had like a lot of subjects that we'd like to talk about, but sometimes you get worried like this subject or topic won't get a lot of engagement. So how do you make, like, what is the thought process between like picking a subject topic to talk about and to do a podcast about and making sure like it gets engagement? So are there any tips or advice regarding that?
Do you mean a topic for the entire show or for a certain episode?
For a certain episode.
Well, here's what I think. If you're interested in it, Mohammed, someone else is going to be interested in it. If you want this topic because you find it interesting, there's going to be other people out there who also find it interesting. And it could actually be a really good way to tap into new audiences, because if you normally talk on certain topics and then there's something else you want to bring in that's very different, that's going to expose you to a whole new group of people, and they're all going to be exposed to your podcast for the first time. So it's actually a really good way to kind of get your feelers out and get your feet wet. I wouldn't put so much pressure on the engagement for one episode on a unique or interesting topic. You're trying it out. Maybe you'll be surprised and tons of people will listen and be interested. Maybe, okay, not as much engagement, but you really like the content, you like the subject, you wanted to explore it. Great, you have that episode. That's really what I think about it. I mean, if it's something you want to listen to, there's going to be other people who want to listen to.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie and Sammar.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's spot on, Stephanie. Totally agree with that. You just got to have a go. Just as an example, even this very topic for me is kind of straying off my traditional territory. I was doing a lot of stuff on my industry and consumer industries and retail, but I thought, actually, I have an opinion and I have a platform and I'd like to explore this topic. And exactly by doing what you said, I've also reached out and connected with many additional people, some who have joined today around this topic. So with that, I think we'll come to a close. We're over time. I think this has been my best attended event so far. We had over 140 registrations and made over 10,000 impressions. So thank you everyone for that. Have recorded this. I hope the recording comes out well, and I will share this in due course. But again, thank you so much for joining the Strategy Remix. Really appreciate your time and attention. Do feel free to reach out to me with any comments, suggestions. If you'd like to be a guest in the future, we'd be delighted to have you. Also, on Stephanie's behalf, do feel free to share your comments and feedback. We'll be delighted to get those from you. Stephanie, any final comments?
This was awesome. This was great. I hope it was helpful. I'm always here to answer any questions, or if I can be helpful to you on your podcasting journey or anything, please feel free to reach out to me for now on LinkedIn, or you should, of course, also listen to my podcast, What Should I Do With My Life? And it's available wherever you get your podcast. So listen up, and lots of good content to come as well.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. So with that, stay tuned. Look out for future Strategy Remix sessions. I'll be publicizing them on LinkedIn in the very near future. So thank you for your kind attention, and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Stephanie, thank you so much for your contribution. Absolutely brilliant. I think that one of our best well-attended sessions. Thank you again.
Oh my God, thank you. It's so much fun. I loved it. It's really great session.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.